for all that you continue to do and teach our first graders as well in our CCD program. I would like to introduce Rian Oncena, and he is new to our parish. He and his family came to St. Mark in Greencastle in 2017, in the summer of 2017. So Ryan and his wife Enid and their children are new to our parish, and Ryan and Enid are part of a Catholic organization called Couples for Christ. And so he goes with them and does presentations for Couples for Christ as well. So I'm very much looking forward to listening to Ryan today as he talks about Jesus Christ. So Ryan, please come forward. Thank you very much.
Good morning, CCD parents. Father said, my name is Rian Oncena. Before we start, a lot of the material that I'm going to say was surprisingly actually informed that website. I looked at that, and if you do just a short Google search, Jesus, in the entry over there, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, I should have just pulled the whole catalog, right? But it pulled maybe 830 hits. And then there's an audiobook there that I particularly like. It's the book Case for Christ. If you've heard of that, it's a lot of apologetics, historical excerpts of Jesus Christ, which I will mention today. All right. So a little bit about myself. This is my crazy family. As Father said, that we moved here about a year ago, and we like the area so far, definitely. But we are part of Couples for Christ back in Maryland, and it's a great lay Catholic community. We support each other. We have a lot of formation. We have a lot of formation talks. Even before we were married, Enid and I, we were in a subgroup of Couples for Christ, which is Singles for Christ, and that's where our love blossomed, I guess. That's where we really gotten to know and gotten to love Christ through formation in Couples for Christ. So let's start. Who is Jesus Christ? As Christians, we derive our identity from Him. It's in our name, Christians. Millions claim to be His followers, even after 2,000 years after His death. I did a little bit of research on that. In 2011, Pew Research, there are actually 2.19 billion Christians around the world. That's a lot. And I'm sure a majority of them here in Greencastle are right here. Countless have been martyred for their faith in Him, exceeding 10,000 people. The book about Him is easily the #1 bestseller of all time. He is the person who won our salvation, restored our relationship to God. Realizing the importance of this person, wouldn't we want to learn more about Him? So we ask, who is Jesus Christ? Me, myself, having been born and raised Catholic, I've really personally taken for granted that Jesus is the Son of God. I just, they drill that into you in Catholic school. We'll learn more about this, and we'll tackle this a little more. During His time, people close to Him found it hard to accept that He was anyone other than a previous acquaintance. In Mark 6, let me read this to you. He went away from there and came to His own country, and His disciples followed Him. And on the Sabbath, He began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get all this? What is the wisdom given to him? What mighty works are wrought by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor, except in his own country, and among his own kin, and in his own house." And he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief, and he went about among other villages teaching. So it's very simple. If you could be a lawyer today, you could be a doctor today, but within your peers, they'll still remember you as the one who was wearing diapers. Jesus found it hard to that other people would believe that he was God. What we really want to know is if Jesus would be placed in the same level as Buddha, Lao Tse, Confucius, and Socrates, and many other wise men. Was Jesus really more than a great and moral teacher? Well, history is actually chock full of men who claim that they came from God, that they were gods, and that they bore messages from God. How is Jesus different from all of them? Well, there are three things that make him unique. First, his coming was pre-announced and expected. There are a lot of prophecies about him. I'm going to name a few. In the book of Isaiah, his birth was mentioned, of a virgin. In the book of Micah, his birthplace was mentioned, Bethlehem. In the book of Genesis, his lineage, descendant of Isaac and Jacob, a tribe of Judah. In the book of Psalms, his betrayal was foretold. Accusation of false witnesses. Also in the book of Psalms, his manner of death, pierced by his hands and feet. Now this is very interesting because crucifixion was not even invented at that time. And also in the Psalms, his resurrection. He would not decay, but he would ascend on high. And many, many, many know. The chances of this happening and coming into fruition into one person is just astounding. In fact, a mathematician tried to calculate the chances of this happening. And, well, he came up with a number. It's 1 is to trillion, trillion, trillion. The odds are really stacked up. Second, once he appeared on the scene, he made such an impact that he split history into two. He divided it into two periods, BC and AD, before Christ and Anno Domini, the years after the incarnation. We would normally refer to it as the year of Domini. Third, every other person in this world came to live. You and me, our children. He came to the world to die and defeat death. His death was one of his goals. This is such an interesting person. Wouldn't we want to know more about him? Right? So let's talk about the details of his life. Jesus was a young carpenter in Nazareth. He started teaching about the scriptures and continued for about 3 years. Well, how do we know that it's about 3 years? Well, people smarter than me calculated it and looked at the scripture and counted the holidays. So he traveled by foot, and he was never more than 100 miles away from his home. And he has never been to a city with a population larger than 50,000. So within 3 years of his public ministry, he was killed in Jerusalem within the rule of the Roman Empire, and he was crucified for stirring the people up. By every right, he should have faded into oblivion. Just think about it. Let's say I'll make myself an example. You know, I'm kind of handy. I'm an architect. I know myself. I know my tools. So I'm Ryan, the handyman of Greencastle, and I started preaching to different churches, and for 3 years consecutively, and then I traveled by foot 100 miles from this place. Would be 100 miles circus would be like Harrisburg all the way to Baltimore, maybe a little bit of DC. And then I would only go to a place that's like 50,000 population, would be like Hagerstown, right? And then I had a lot of followers, Twitter followers, probably. And I performed a lot of miracles. And then I was arrested by the Hagerstown police for blasphemy. And then I was executed on a Friday at 3 p.m. Now, what can I ask you? Would I be on the Friday night news? What do you think? Yeah, right? Would I be on the Sunday night news? Probably, right? A few outlets there. Now, would I be on the Friday night news the next week? Probably not. I'll be buried all the way there. So, really, by every right, same thing. Jesus would have been faded into oblivion. But instead, he is the most famous and honored person who ever walked the earth. Now let's just try to find out what was he like. He had a very attractive personality. He was a major attraction of the times. In Mark 9, let me read this to you. This was the story about him healing a boy with a spirit. When they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd about them. And the scribes arguing with them. And immediately all the crowd, when they saw him, were greatly amazed, and ran up and greeted him and asked, "What are you discussing with him?" And one of the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son, for he has a dumb spirit, and wherever it seizes him, it dashes him down and foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid." And asked her disciples to cast it out, and they were not able. And he answered them, "Oh, faithless generation." So this could be told. My wife is signaling me. She did the PowerPoint. Is that right? So, "Oh, faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you?"
Introduce Ryan.
And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, he immediately convulsed. And Jesus cast him out. When he cast out the spirit, a crowd immediately joined. Wherever he goes, he attracts a crowd. People are just amazed at his teaching and in his miracles. Another thing what was he like is he had a strong mind and body. There it is. That was the slide. That's why she was just like, one more. And he had a strong mind and body. He outwitted the scribes and leaders of his day in discussion about the scriptures as a boy of 12, as his father mentioned. And also later as a man during his public ministry. And he was also able to fast for 40 days. I mean, come on. We're asked to fast 2 days during Lent. And you know, sometimes we fail that. Come on. He was also a magnetic leader. He summoned Simon and Andrew and James and John. I'll read that to you right now. And this is in Mark 1. And passing along by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net in the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on a little farther, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who were in the boat mending their nets. And immediately he called them. And they left their father Zebedee in the boat with their hired servants and followed him. And this is another story about Levi. He went out again beside the sea, and all the crowd gathered about him and taught them. And he passed on and saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax office. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. And as he sat at the table of the house, many tax collectors were sitting with Jesus and his disciples, and there were many who followed him. I call my kids their first names to have dinner. I call them by their first names and their middle names. They still won't come. First names, middle names, last names, they still won't come. And he utters the word, "Follow me," and they drop what they're doing. He was also a man of extraordinary authority. He broke long-standing traditions for the sake of higher righteousness, like Moses about divorce. Moses allowed divorce because of the hardness of their hearts. That was not so in the beginning. That's what Jesus said. And he healed the disabled and the sick. He healed the leper in Mark 1. Let me read this to you. And a leper came to him, beseeching him, and kneeling said to him, "If you will, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I will be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. And he sternly charged him and sent him away at once and said to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded for a proof of to the people." But he went out and began to talk freely about it and to spread the news, so that Jesus could no longer openly enter a town, but was out of the country, and people came to him at every quarter. He also gave orders to nature, which were obeyed. In Mark 4, Jesus sails a storm. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them, and just as he was in the boat, and other boats were with him, and a great storm of wind arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a cushion, and they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care if we perish?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you no faith?" And they were filled with awe, and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even wind and sea obey him?" He was also not confused about his mission. See, back then, the Jews, of course, under the rule of the Roman Empire, they've been searching for a new king. But he resisted the desire of his followers to make him a political king. He even rebuked Peter for standing in the way of fulfilling his mission. In Matthew 16, from the time Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, "God forbid, Lord, this shall never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not on the side of God, but of men." He was also very human. He showed tenderness, experienced anger and grief, anger at the marketplace, where he turned the tables, and grief when Lazarus died. He cried. Now, just gathering all this, we now know that really Jesus is a totally unique personality, clearly worth knowing. But is there more than this awesome personality? Is he worthy to be the center of our life? Well, the answer is yes, of course. There's something more to Jesus than any other person in history. He is God. How do we know that he's God? Is it through the miracles that he performed during his public ministry? Miracles only show that God is working through a person. And in fact, saints, in order to be a saint, you have to have a miracle attributed to your name. And if you can recall Moses in the Moses story, he parted the Red Sea. So how can we be sure? The answer is simply because he told us so. In Mark 14, this was when Jesus was brought forth to the Sanhedrin, and they led Jesus to the high priest and all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes who were assembled. And Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with guards and warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death. But they found none, for many bore false witness against him, and their witnesses did not agree. And some stood up and bore false witness against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands.' Yet not even so did their testimony agree. And the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, 'Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you?' But he was silent and made no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, 'Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?' And Jesus said, 'I am, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven.' And the high priest tore his mantle and said, 'Why do we still need witnesses? You heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?' And they all condemned him as deserving death, and some began to spit on him and cover his face, and to strike him and saying, 'Prophecy!' And the guards received him with blows." Also in the book of John, he himself spoke of his divinity. Book of John 12, it was a feast of the dedication of Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking the temple in the portico of Solomon. So the Jews gathered around him and said to him, "How long will you keep us in suspense?" And they were in suspense of Christ telling them what's up. "If you are the Christ, just tell us plainly." Jesus answered them, "I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness to me. But you do not believe, because you do not belong to my sheep. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. And no one shall snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one." Jesus' claim to divinity is far different from Buddha, Confucius, and Muhammad has ever made. None of them claim to be God. This is a direct quote from a favorite author of mine, C.S. Lewis. On the one side, clear, definite moral teaching. On the other, claims which, if not true, are those of a megalomaniac compared with whom Hitler was the most sane and humble of men. There is no halfway house. There is no parallel in other religions. If you had gone to Buddha and asked him, "Are you the son of Brahma?" he would have said, "My son, you are still in the veil of illusion." If you had gone to Socrates and asked, "Are you Zeus?" he would have laughed at you And if you had gone to Muhammad and asked, "Are you Allah?" he would have first rent his clothes, then cut your head off. If you had asked Confucius, "Are you heaven?" I think he would probably reply, "Remarks which are not in accordance with nature are in bad taste." The idea of a great moral teacher saying what Christ said is out of the question. In my opinion, the only person who can say that sort of thing is either God or a complete lunatic suffering from that form of delusion which undermines the whole mind of man. Jesus also claimed that he could forgive sin. And among the Jews, only God can forgive sin. That's what their whole belief is. In the story of the paralytic at Capernaum in Mark chapter 2, this was, I think this was just mentioned last week or something. But they lowered the paralytic over the roof of a house. It was full of people, and Jesus was there. And their faith, the friends of the paralytic's faith, they were so convinced that Jesus would heal him. They lowered him down the roof, and Jesus saw him and said, "Your sins are forgiven. Go." He heard the murmurs, the scribes, and said, how can he do this? Only Jesus forgives, only God forgives sin. And he said, "Well, what would you rather believe, that I forgave this man's sin, or that I'll tell him to get up and pick up his stuff and go?" Which he did. And also the paralytic man just stood up and got out of Dodge. In the book Mere Christianity, also from C.S. Lewis, I'm going to read to you a quote from him again. "Now, unless the speaker is God, this is really so preposterous as to be comic. We can all understand how a man forgives offenses against himself. You tread on my toe, I forgive you. You steal my money, I forgive you. But what should we make of a man himself, unrolled, untrodden on, who announced that he forgave you for treading on other men's toes, stealing other men's property? Asinine fatuity is the kindest description we should give of his conduct. Yet this is what Jesus did. He told people that their sins were forgiven and never waited to consult all the other people whom their sins had undoubtedly been injured. He unhesitatingly behaved as if he was the party chiefly concerned, the person chiefly offended in all offenses. This makes sense only if he really was God, whose laws were broken, and whose love was wounded in every sin. In the mouth of any speaker who is not God, these words would imply that what I can only regard as a silliness and conceit unrivaled by any other character in history. So this is the question, really, that I want you guys to take home. Jesus' claim to God must either be true or false. If false, there are only two alternatives. Either he knew it was false, in which case he would be a liar, or he did not know it was false, in which case he would be a lunatic. Could Jesus have lied? Well, if he lied, he deliberately deceived his followers. And he would not only be a liar, he would also be a hypocrite. He told others to be honest, while he himself taught this colossal lie. And he'd be a demon, because he told others to trust him for their eternal destiny. If he knew he couldn't back it up, then he would just be unspeakably evil. And he would also be a fool, because his claim to being God led him to his death. We should just only look at his persona, his words, his work. Read the Gospels. If you read the Gospels, it's very clear that he is of moral purity, of moral dignity. He carried out this great plan of magnitude, of moral magnitude, that sacrificed his own life for it. Would he really die for a lie? Even before leading his death, there was scourging at the pillar. It was described back then that scourging, with the tools that they used for scourging, if you have seen the Passion of the Christ, scourging with the tools that has those hooks that latch onto your skin and then pull the skin off. And it was described as filleting of a human. Would he die for that much pain, enduring that much pain? Such a man cannot be a liar. Now, could Jesus could have been a lunatic? Again, reading the Gospels, we do not see any abnormalities that would describe such a deranged person. A licensed clinical psychologist with a PhD in clinical psychology from Purdue University actually took a stab at it and analyzed it. Dr. Gary Collins. He's an author of more than 170 articles and more than 60 books. And he analyzed Jesus. This is what he said. Jesus exhibited no inappropriate emotions, was in contact with reality, was brilliant, and had amazing insights into human nature, enjoyed deep and abiding relationships. He said, I just don't see any signs that Jesus was suffering from any mental illness. Such a man cannot be a lunatic. So, if he is not a liar, and he's not a lunatic, then we have only one alternative. That Jesus spoke the truth. His claim to be the Son of God must be true. Other people actually have confirmed this for us. Simon Peter in Matthew 16. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do men say that the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. He said to them, well, who do you say I am? Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered to him, blessed are you, Simon, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the powers of death shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then he strictly charged the disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. Also Martha, in John 11, Lazarus already died, and he was already in the tomb for 4 days. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him while Mary sat in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise. Martha said to him, I know he will rise again in the resurrection and in the last day. Jesus said to her, no, I am the resurrection and I am the life. He who believes in me, Though he died, yet he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. Thomas, doubting Thomas. In John 20, Thomas was one of the 12. He called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So other disciples told him, We have seen the Lord. But he said to them, Unless I see his hands, the print of his nails, and place my finger in the mark of the nails, and place my hand in his side, I will not believe. Talk about that one lapse in judgment, right? All throughout history, he's known as the doubting Thomas. I kind of just want to read into the scripture about this a little bit. If you could talk to him right now, it'd be like, it was just this one time, please, just give me a break. I doubted him one time. So 8 days later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. The doors were shut, and Jesus stood among them and said, Peace be with you. And he said to Thomas, Put your finger here, see my hands. Put out your hand, place it on my side. Do not be faithless, but believe in me. Thomas, this is the key. Thomas answered, My Lord and my God. Jesus said to him, Have you believed because you see me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. Even the centurion at the foot of the cross, at his death, at the 6th hour, there was darkness, and then he said, my God, why thou hast forsaken me? And some of the bystanders hearing it, oh, this man is calling Elijah. And one of them once ran and took a sponge, filled it with vinegar, and put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come and save him. And Jesus cried again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split, and the tombs were also opened. And many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. When the centurion was with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe. And he said, Truly, this was the Son of God. Who else can confirm that Jesus is God? God himself. Again, with the Lazarus story. Now, this is a different account in John 11. So Jesus, deeply moved again, came into the tomb, and it was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead for 4 days. And Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, He prayed. He said, Father, I thank you, for you have heard me. I know that you always hear me. But I have said this on account of the people standing by, that they may believe that you sent me. When he said this, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with bandages, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to him, Unbind him and let him go. So, like I said to the Jews, only God alone has the prerogative of who gives life and who takes away life. Only God can do that. So they were totally in awe. But the most conclusive proof that Jesus is God is his own resurrection from the dead. The tombs of Buddha, Muhammad, and other founders of great religions, they're still with us. Their remains are still with us. Only Jesus' tomb is empty. Knowing all this, CCD parents, Jesus is a man whose words and life demand a response. He's making claims that affect us. If he is not God, then we should have nothing to do with it. But if he is God, we should seriously consider his teachings, and our response will have eternal consequences. The choice is yours. A little short sharing. So Jesus can be anybody whom you need, right? To me, Jesus is my friend and my protector. He's a good friend, especially in 2016. We lost a child. I lost my dad. And I also almost died myself because I had Lyme carditis. I was driving home and I just blacked out while driving 70 miles an hour down 70. And I woke up 2 seconds later, I was still driving. Still tractor trailers were driving past me. And I was like, what's going on? I thought I was going to die. During that year, if I did not have the faith in him, that Jesus is God, and I know now that 2016 was really a tough year. I would have just broken down. I would just not be with you guys. So really, the choice. I've heard this talk before. This talk was given to me back in 2004. When I first heard it, I started to realize that, wow, oh yeah, he is something else. I need to know more about it. I need to learn more about it. So I did. I tried to learn. I tried to research more about it, read books. It was very late in my life that I learned about and learned to love Jesus. But there's no better time than today. So CCD parents, for this month, it's a little easier, I think, just because we know a lot about Jesus for this month, to teach your kids. I want to say it's a lot easier than last month, because last month I had a couple of kind of eerie questions from my kids, like, what is a virgin? And where do babies come from? So it's a little tough. But I want to encourage you guys, this month it's a little bit easier, and I hope your journey to know Jesus would be as fruitful for your family as